I met this professor at UCLA. I get into his office to show him the software, and he's got an air mattress off to the side. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh yeah, I can't afford to live anywhere near Westwood. I live 5 hours away, and I shower in the gym and sleep in my office Monday through Friday. And I was just like totally shocked. And I kind of just got obsessed with that problem. Like, how is this happening?
Tade, we're going to learn how you raised over $29 million, got Sam Altman as an investor, and just recently Dr. Shaquille O'Neal in that journey. But before we do, I think early context here is pretty important. What would be the earliest thing I would have to know about you to understand who you are and all that you've accomplished?
It's a great question. Thanks for having me. It's going to be a fun conversation. I think probably the thing my entire life I've been told is the most interesting thing about me is that I'm an identical twin. So met my brother in the amniotic sac. And I have an older sister who's like really, really clever. So my parents ended up deciding to homeschool the three of us. And that's probably played a big impact. I was sort of born and raised in Atlanta to Nigerian American parents. And homeschooled until high school and had a lot of fun. I loved growing up. It was pretty awesome. And I think that's probably where it all started.
How did homeschooling work? I mean, your mom was getting a PhD at the same time as you were learning from home. What was that process?
Shockingly, believe it or not, it was literally only 4 hours of school a day. Like we did school like from 10 to 2 and had the rest of the day. So it was pretty great. I mean, I think until I hit puberty, I loved it. I think when you're really young, you're just curious. You want to explore things that you care about. And I think that's the best thing in homeschool. There's like structured learning, but then there's so much that if you're like really getting into a subject, you don't have to like move on to the next, subject and switch from math to like, social studies just because the bell rings. Like you can kind of go deeper and follow your curiosities. So I enjoyed it a lot. I think my siblings did as well. And then when you hit puberty, it's like, okay, you like girls, and now you want to meet people, and it's like, hey, I'm sitting across from my brother and my sister all day. It's it's unideal. So I loved it until probably like 11, and then I think around 11 started actively lobbying my parents for us to go to school outside.
And then I think you ended up going to high school and you graduated high school early at 16, right? So what was that transition from being homeschooled to then going into the public education system?
Yeah, so it started with my sister. She's sort of like the perfect child. And my brother and I were always trying to keep up with her. And she just like one summer in middle school just decided to keep the summer on and just like try and do an entire grade of work in the summer. And then she did it. And then when my brother and I hit age 12, we tried to do the same thing and we did it. So like that's how we ended up getting ahead. And yeah, the transition was interesting. There was first generally exciting. We'd watched all these Disney Channel like depictions of high school, all these 80s movies on like high school, and then you get in there and it's like, wait, people actually bully people? Like that's like I was like, wait, is this a joke? Like it's like, wait, this kid's actually getting like it was just bizarre. And so there was this like I kind of felt like I was on the outside looking in, like watching how these humans interact. And I was always curious about these social dynamics. And that was fun. And then, a couple of years to adjust. And then, by the junior year, it was pretty in the flow of things.
When you were in high school, is there something that you realized like, hey, there's something I need to change here? Or is there anything you noticed about the education system then? Or was that later on a discovery?
I was not thinking about education in high school. I actually started flying early. I came across a program called ACE Camp, OBAP ACE Camp. It's a partnership between Delta and the Organization of Black Airline Pilots. Now they've renamed it the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. But anyway, they had like a summer program where you can fly and start flight school, and they paid for it. It was all paid for by Delta. And so I actually started flying aircraft when I was 12. And enjoyed that program. And so that was a big focus of mine. And then my brother and I had started a couple of internet businesses, and that was probably like my second priority. And then, in high school, first 2 years, I didn't really get that into the sort of social scene that much. And then junior year, played football and started doing some of that stuff. So I think actually I started playing football sophomore year, but yeah, I think wasn't too concerned with education like from that level at the time. Was really thinking about aviation and like our businesses, and then school third.
I don't think I even started learning how to drive until just a couple of years ago. You were already flying planes at 12. What did your parents or people around you think about, you going up into the air at just 12 years old?
My dad's perspective in particular on like young people and their ability to do things is like like treat them like adults and like try and develop them as quickly as possible. He'd read in the paper about a girl whose father had a heart attack. She was like 10 or 11 while he was driving, and like the girl saved his life by like getting into the driver's seat and driving him to the hospital in the emergency room, and because he taught her how to drive already. And so he taught us how to drive when we were like 10 or 11. And he taught us how to drive stick because he thought a man needs to know how to drive stick. He also taught my sister, of course. So yeah, they were really excited about it. And I think my mother may have been slightly concerned, but they were really excited.
And I get, so you wanted to be a pilot. What transitioned out of being a pilot to then becoming an entrepreneur? What created that movement?
It's so lame when I think back to how much of my like decisions that I made from age 16 to 20 were like influenced by film. But I watched The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio about Howard Hughes, got really excited about Howard Hughes, went really deep, down into Howard Hughes. Are you familiar with Howard Hughes?
Name sounds familiar.
He was like a brilliant, like really interesting character. So he is responsible for a lot of Hollywood's development, but he's also responsible for pretty much the sort of accelerating the advent of the jet age. And so he's this eccentric billionaire who, built and designed aircraft for the U.S. during World War II, and then also took a lot of his money and then plowed it into, he bought Trans World Airways, competed with Pan Am Airways, which was run by Juan Trippe at the time. And anyway, he just like had this really interesting life that was centered around aviation, but also other things. And I kind of wanted to model my life off of him. He ended up, sort of going insane before he passed. Not that part, but like, the entrepreneurial stuff is where I was really inspired. And then it just sort of occurred to me that being a pilot, which is what I wanted to be originally, wasn't going to lead me to like having that kind of an impact on aviation, and that you actually had to be more of an entrepreneur. You actually had to have the resources to invest in like simple things he did, like buying an airline was like a really risky thing to do. Like people forget, but like flying, like at the time, I forget the exact numbers, but let's say 15% of Americans would even get on a plane. Like they're like, these things are falling out of the sky. Like this is way too dangerous, way too risky. And so it's like a huge bet that this is going to get safer over time. And then a big part of what made it safer was jets, which really made it easier for us to fly above the clouds, which means fly above the weather, which means a much smoother ride. And so like, anyway, he was just like, this like super passionate believer in this industry and sort of willed it into an existence. I think almost everyone, I don't know the numbers today, probably 90+% of people are totally comfortable flying, and that's largely thanks to him. So anyway, I was inspired by him, wanted to sort of model things off of him. And so while I continued to fly for fun on the side, I was like, okay, let me actually learn how these aircraft work and learn how to design them. So I decided to study aerospace engineering. And then, and I'd always sort of done entrepreneurial things just since homeschool days.
And as an undergrad, so when you were studying aerospace engineering, it's actually when you launched one of your first company. What was that company, and what were you doing at the time?
I watched The Social Network. It was such an impactful film for me. And I was just like drinking with my buddies at Leeds, my flatmate Patrick, and my brother Tosh, my twin brother who was studying at Oxford at the time, had came up to visit us, and like we just finished the film, and I'm just thinking like, wow, like what can we do that is similar to this? And I think the way that Zuckerberg had figured out how to increase the quality and the like legitimacy of the social network Facebook by using real identity I thought that, I just sort of fixated on that, and I was like, okay, well, what can we do? What other kinds of interesting things can you do if you have real identity online? And he used .edu emails as like this proxy for verified identity to seed Facebook's initial growth. And I thought, wait, like how else? Like what other analogs could we use that same mechanism against? And so the two ideas were, one was Craigslist, so like classifieds, online shopping, like sort of peer-to-peer online shopping. I'd bought some things on Craigslist and actually sold some things on Craigslist, and it was just so sketchy. Like I remember delivering our family's china cabinet to someone who had bought it off Craigslist, and I drove into the middle of nowhere, Georgia, and it was just like, I'm like, am I going to get murdered? Like it's like Confederate flags everywhere. I'm like, what's going on? And so it was, that was, it was a bit tricky, and the people ended up being super nice and lovely. But like generally speaking, I think I thought if there was verified identity, classifieds could be safer. And so we actually originally started as something we called it Glee Post, and it was supposed to be like a classifieds with verified identity. So you had to have a .edu email. Challenge is marketplaces are so difficult to kickstart because you need supply and demand. So it's like we got interesting people to the site, but then there's not enough things to buy, and so then they kind of left. And anyway, we did a bunch of different things to try and kickstart it, but to try and get more demand on the site. Again, another night drinking at Leeds. There was a lot of drinking. We were just using chat roulette. Do you remember? Did you ever use chat roulette? You're probably before your time.
But yeah.
So chat roulette. Do you know what it is?
I know what it is, but I have not used it. Yeah.
So yeah, you basically go to chatroulette.com and you get put in a random sort of Zoom call. It wasn't using Zoom, but like a video call with a stranger on the internet. And it went viral when I was in undergrad. And so we thought, well, if we required people to use their actual identity by verifying their university affiliated email, then people would behave better. And so that was the idea. We called it Uni Roulette, and the idea was to make that go viral and then funnel traffic to the classifieds Glee post. But it just took off. Uni Roulette went totally viral. I forget what percentage of people in the undergrads in the UK use it. Probably like 20 or 30% in the first month or so. We grew it. At the time, a friend who lived in our dorm at Leeds started the Lad Bible. Do you know what the Lad Bible is?
No.
It's kind of like the OG Barstool Sports. They're publicly traded, like $500 million company now. But anyway, he started it, and so he helped us kickstart it, and then it was going viral. And then Uni Roulette got posted on the Lad Bible. It took off, and then investors reached out. Like, hey, you want $500,000 to go, make this thing the next thing? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go be the Black Zuck. Let's go make this happen. and so I ended up dropping out to go build Uni Roulette.
What led to that initial spike in users and that viral growth in the beginning?
Playing in the mud is what I call it. Back then, Facebook was so exploitable. So they had a feature where do you remember Facebook pages? Did you even use Facebook?
I didn't even start using it until like a year ago for advertising purposes. But.
Okay. So they have pages and then they have accounts, or they had. I don't even know if they still have pages. But at the time, you could start a Facebook account, and then you could ask or send a bunch of friend requests. So we wrote a script to just send friend requests to tens of thousands of people. And then if you send enough friend requests, 10% of the people, or if you make the the profile image like an attractive woman, like 10 or 15% of people are just going to accept it, and you can be friends. And then you could transform your account into a page. And so that's what we did. So we just create all these Facebook accounts, send thousands of friend requests, get thousands of friends, and then when you transform your account into a page, all of those friends would be likes. And so whenever you post from your page, everyone who's liked your page would see it. And so we had hundreds of these pages that we grew this way, and then they would all post sequentially these screenshots of things happening on Uni Roulette. And again, it'd be some guy at Oxford, in the square talking to some girl from Princeton, and something funny is happening, and then we would just post them at the same time, and then it'd go viral and sort of trend. Facebook used to have a trending topics like Twitter, and then it
Yep.
sort of just went viral.
How did you manage all those accounts? Was it all manually, or did you have some sort of automation set up?
We tried to automate it, but a lot of it was manual. And then the Lad Bible guys, they really nailed the automation, and so we worked with them to like syndicate it, and their pages got to millions of likes really quickly. And then so we did partnerships with them, and they helped us grow it.
Got it. So investors come up.
I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, but this was like the kind of this is back in the day it was like exploit, and you could actually get viral growth.
So right after that, you drop out of uni. Investors come up to you. They're offering $500,000 to invest in your company. What's next?
Yeah. So we actually didn't drop out originally until after the investors invested. They were led by a guy called Doug Scott, who made a bunch of money in the 90s by buying all these domain names and doing interesting things with traffic, also playing in the mud. But yeah, like I remember like after about maybe a week after they invested, he found out we were still in school. He was like, dude, you got to have skin in the game. You got to go full time or give me the money back. And so decided to take a leave of absence, naively assuming, okay, we'd go back. But in hindsight, my buddy Patrick and I never went back. So moved to London, opened an office, hired a handful of people, and tried to make it like work. Like the whole thing was written in Flash, which again is another technology you're probably not familiar with.
Actually, that one I am, because you had to play, I think, any early version of a video game, you had to get Adobe Flash.
Exactly, that's right. And so it just sucked, and like it was so buggy, and the servers, even the back end, wasn't like structurally ready for the load because it was like super like spiky. So we tried to rebuild it, but like 6 to 9 months in, all of the growth fell off a cliff. It was like Clubhouse. Like before, I remember watching this happen with Clubhouse, and I go, I know how this story ends. It was just like the kind of thing everyone wants to try like once or twice, and then it's it's a fad. It's over, and they move on to the next thing. And it wasn't something that provided long-term sustaining value. So that's what happened.
Do you ever regret dropping out of college early on?
No.
Why not?
I mean, I was actually pretty thoughtful about making that decision. And I just made the choice. I was like, which thing would I rather regret, like dropping out or when I'm 40 and I see someone else took my idea and like made it into like this huge world changing thing, and knowing that I could have been that guy. And I sort of made that call. And so I've had no anxiety about that decision since. My mother, maybe a different story, but I've had no anxiety.
I think it's a big thing to make decisions on what you will regret the least. I think that's a key takeaway there.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it was built off Flash, and it was a fad, but why did it ultimately end up failing and going into the ground?
I mean, I think it's a liquidity thing. Like, there's probably something of like a 6-second or 8-second rule when people are opening their phones or their computers and they're using a social app. They need to see something interesting, like that dopamine hit. It just has to come consistently. And it's one thing when you're like looking for tweets or images, that's easy because people can post hundreds of them. But people don't have all day to be just waiting on Uni Roulette to meet someone interesting. And so the liquidity problem was just so challenging. We did all types of things to try and solve it. But anyway, ended up shutting down the company. At this time, but before we did that, we'd actually moved to California because we tried to raise an additional round of funding in the UK, and it's just a lot harder than raising in the States. And so we moved to California. My brother Tosh and Patrick, we all moved, and basically pivoted the company to being a consulting firm, basically trying to build mobile apps for universities. At the time, it's like 2013, 2014. Every university just like thought they needed to be in the App Store. They didn't know exactly what the apps needed to do, but they knew that they needed their logo, their app in the App Store and the Play Store. So we just built simple apps for the universities, and that's kind of how I got really deep on higher education software like EdTech.
And how did you get these universities as clients? Would you go up to them and say, "Hey, I know the App Store is popping off. You guys should have an app"? Or
it was really hard. I mean, like they're just like very slow moving. They make decisions based on committees most of the time, and so we got a bunch of pilots. You got a couple paying, but in the end, I actually learned I don't like enterprise sales with universities. The sales cycles are too long, and it's too challenging to get to a yes. And so what we actually ended up doing was shutting down the company. It wasn't successful. My buddy Patrick went to work at one of our friends' companies that was doing better, and then my brother Tosh moved back to England to sort of start his own. He's a real estate developer now, so he started his project back in London, and I moved forward with an idea I had since I was homeschooled, which was a much better system for online learning. So when you're online learning, when you're homeschooled in the 90s, you spend most of your time learning online. Digital textbooks, sort of e-learning tools, encyclopedia online that you're researching with, and we were part of a homeschool group where we had other homeschooled peers. And anyway, I just had like this perspective around what if you could build Skype, is what I compared it to at the time, but like specifically for online learning use cases. And in 2016 now, Slack is taking off in the workplace. Discord's taking off for like social and gaming. And then Zoom was you're starting to hear about Zoom. So I was like, man, someone should build something just like this, but for higher ed. So like an online communication platform for online learning in universities. And so I started the second company called CampusWire, and just to build exactly that. And we got, this was pretty great. I was able to meet the folks that run Bloomberg Ventures, and the guy who runs it is a guy called Roy Bahat. He actually taught at Berkeley as a part-time gig, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to use this, so let's fund it. And sort of off to the races with company number 2.
There's actually one story when I was researching for the show that kind of struck me as pretty memorable, is that you went directly to faculty and met a UCLA professor in 2018 whose story shocked you. What was the story?
Yeah, so now we're we've built the tech. I don't want to sell to the universities because I have PTSD, so I want to go directly to the faculty and get them to adopt the software. And yeah, I met this professor at UCLA. I get into his office to show him the software, and he's got an air mattress off to the side. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh yeah, I can't afford to live anywhere near Westwood. I'm an adjunct professor, and I live 5 hours away, and I shower in the gym and sleep in my office Monday through Friday. And I was just like totally shocked. And he was so chill about it. And he was like, yeah, this is like fairly normal. Like a lot of my guys from grad school are doing similar things. And I'd thought adjunct professors was like Michelle Obama or James Comey wants to give back, so they, moonlight teaching a class at Georgetown. I thought that was like what most adjuncts were. And it turns out actually no, most adjuncts, the average adjunct makes less than $50,000 a year. They're usually a somewhat impoverished PhD recent grad who is hoping to get a tenure track teaching job. But again, those have just become so hard to come by. So today, more than 55% of professors today in the US, even at top universities like Columbia or UCLA, are adjuncts. And so, I was like shocked to discover that. And I kind of just got obsessed with that problem. Like, how is this happening? Again, from the outside, if you're not too familiar with the nuance in the space, it's like tuition costs have done this in higher ed. Like you're about to find out. You go to school. Tuition's like doing that. And yet the faculty who are teaching these large 100-level, 200-level freshman, sophomore classes generally are adjuncts and are generally underpaid, like super low waged. And so I got obsessed with that problem. And then the second thing I discovered by going directly to faculty and serving them with CampusWire was what I call the community college completion crisis. And so, our country, we spend a lot of time talking about how do you make college more accessible, but we don't talk as much about how do you help people who go to and enroll in a community college, how do you make them more successful? How do you help them actually graduate? It's about only 30% of people who go to community college will get an associate's degree, and about 16% will ever get a bachelor's degree. The vast majority, even though they come there with the intention of pursuing, about 82% are coming to pursue a bachelor's degree, is why they're going to community college to transfer into a 4-year. The vast majority never will. And so,
why is that?
well, it's super complex. There's a lot of factors. I think generally speaking, if you're going to community college, you're disproportionately likely to be the first in your family to go to school. You're disproportionately likely to be working at least 20 hours a week. Many of them are working actually 40 hours a week. And yeah, you just basically have a more complex life. It's not a country club, for the young, ambitious 18-year-olds that like Leeds was, or, wherever you probably end up going to school might be. It's like, hey, I actually want to learn and I want to get a degree so that I can go and, market that credential in the marketplace and get a great career. It's really focused on that. But these young people generally are having much more complex, living situations that make it more difficult for them to like say, hey, school is the only thing that really matters. I didn't work when I was undergrad. I had my side businesses and I started my company, but like I didn't have to like go and like, work at Walmart, like 20, 40 hours a week. Most of these young people are. And so they need more support. They need guidance, even just navigating the FAFSA. Like how do you get, if you haven't figured it out, you're about to find out how.
Yeah, that was what we're going through like just a couple months ago. So.
Yeah, it's like, how do you even apply for financial aid? University has got all this, unique, sort of arcane, nomenclature, like what is a 100-level course versus a 200-level course, and what are credits and cost per credit. I mean, it's just like it's almost set up. It can feel to if you're the first in your family to go through this, like it's set up to be complex to keep you out, and that's how a lot of these students feel. And so, in any case, the vast majority of them never graduate, and almost none of them, only 16%, will ever get a bachelor's degree. And yet we know that if you earn a bachelor's degree, you'll earn over the course of your career about $1 million more. And if you get an associate's degree, you're going to earn about $500,000 more compared to someone with just a high school diploma. And so it's really important that we figure out how to get people access to these degrees. And so the big idea that I couldn't get out of my head was, what would it look like to give everybody in America access to these amazing teachers? Like, these 100-level, 200-level instructors, these adjunct professors at these top 50 universities. And so that was the big idea. Like let's figure out how to give everybody access. And so, decided, to build on top of CampusWire and to use CampusWire rather than trying to sell it as a software platform, make it free. So we made it completely free, but let's go and find a community college, and then let's try and do community college different and make it better, more accessible, provide more supports to students so that they actually graduate, and then upgrade the faculty by giving everybody access to these professors who, are super inspirational, who most people would never think they have access to.
Do you think it's set up complexly or to be a complex system intentionally? Because I guess if it is more complex, it gives a perception that there's greater value that's being provided to the student?
No, one of the things I learned studying aerospace engineering, you're doing all these projects and you're trying to design these things, and it's like sometimes when a bunch of smart people get together and try and do something, they just make it way too freaking complex. And I think that there's nowhere that is more true than in higher ed. It's like a very old system. It's just become more complex over time. It's like when you write a piece of code and then you keep like a Frankenstein's monster, just like appending new things onto like the code base over time. It becomes a monster. And I think higher ed in a lot of ways has just, of no sort of intentional decision, just sort of evolved into this really complex beast. And part of what I think higher ed needs to do to be more accessible is to just simplify, abstract away a lot of that complexity and provide young people with like a simple interface to like engage with higher ed. And that's part of what we try to do at campus.
It's also been really inefficient, the U.S. education system, in a way, because in an interview, I remember you shared that the UK has 200 universities to manage 2 million people a year, while the US has 20 million students, but 4,000 colleges and universities. Why? What's causing this gap in efficiency?
Well, yeah. So, you just do the math. We're half as efficient because every additional institution is an additional provost of this, dean of that, chancellor of this, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just more, employee count. All those salaries have to be paid, all those benefits. And then that, drops down to the tuition bottom line, and tuition, continues to rise. As for exactly how we evolved in this way, I think it's quite interesting. On one hand, we do have the sort of number one education system in the world, and I think the Brits are the only ones that really compare. And we do great research, and we do a lot of things really, really well. But higher ed has become, as one of my favorite writers, Clayton Christensen, likes to say, a bundle of services. And so it's not really an education system anymore in the traditional sense alone.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but I have a quick 5-second favor to ask you. If you're enjoying this episode, would love it if you subscribe down below. Helps the channel more than you can imagine. Thank you very much. And back to the interview.
It does so much more. And so if you think about a traditional university today, yes, okay, you teach people. So it's an educational institution. You also create new knowledge, which through research. So, research. Then you have a minor league sports team. It's like semi-pro sports in the U.S. That's not how it works in the U.K. These massive stadiums. I think the highest paid state employees in 31 states is the state football coach. More than the governor, more than anybody, it's the state football coach. So this minor league sports team, country club for upper middle class and affluent young people. No shame in that. It's totally reasonable, but that's what it is. A dating app. My mom was like, I hope you find a wife in college. And you could say with the endowments, a hedge fund. So it's I think when it's become this sprawling bundle of services, it's difficult to focus and refocus continually on, okay, well, what are we actually here to do? Now, I do think community colleges do a slightly better job at focusing on just education. Generally there's no residence, there's no dorms, you sort of live at home, you go and take your classes, you go home. The challenge with community colleges, beyond the completion, is they also have to serve so many disparate constituents. It's who does the community college serve? Is it the students first, or is it the faculty unions first, or is it the local community first? What's the hierarchy of service? And the community college leaders are doing their best to try and manage these disparate interest groups with disparate needs that are sometimes at odds. And so, for example, if you're a faculty member, if you're a part of a faculty union, sometimes your objective is to maximize teaching opportunities and wages for faculty. Totally reasonable objective to have from their perspective. But what that means is, in many cases, we've seen these contracts where the faculty union will mandate that if there's a single student who wants to take a class, the university or the community college has to offer the course. And so it's one kid in basket weaving, learning from a professor and a TA. And it's if you just do the math, professor salary for one student, it doesn't really make sense. You should really have a threshold where you need 20 students or 30 students, whatever the threshold is, minimum to run a course. And so when you have these inefficiencies of one student in a class in many cases at most of these institutions, well, yeah, you have to raise your tuition or rely heavily on state funding, as most of these institutions have to. You don't actually have a balanced budget in most cases without these subsidies. And so overall, I think what we saw was there was need for someone to come in, take over an institution, and then simplify, use technology to improve the student experience, provide wraparound supports. So we were actually inspired by, here in New York, the CUNY's ASAP program, which actually figured out how to get to 51% graduation rates at the community college level, and then to really bring in these amazing faculty. And so with campus, that's what you get. You get live online instruction. So it's not like the MOOCs, the Coursera and all that stuff where it's you're watching a professor, but the professor pre-recorded the lecture 20 years ago. You're actually meeting face-to-face with these Princeton and these UCLA and these NYU faculty for 3 hours every week with your classmates and TAs. Knock out your first 2 years of college, get your associate's degree, and then we help you transfer into a 4-year university to complete your bachelor's degree. And the coolest thing about it all is that 90% of our online students pay nothing out of pocket for tuition. because the government has what are called Pell Grants, which fully cover if you get a full Pell Grant, fully cover our tuition costs. So our students, the vast majority of them, pay nothing.
And for those who can't afford, for example, a laptop or those types of resources to learn online, what do you guys do on your end?
Yeah, so we've done the math. We've figured out we can actually, if you lower your tuition to the Pell Grant level, you still have enough revenue with which you can actually provide not just the student support services in terms of support coaching and the mental health resources and the tutoring, but we actually give every student a laptop, and about a third of our students, we provide an LTE-enabled laptop, so they have free Wi-Fi on the go.
And for the professors that are currently enrolled or involved in campus, what's your pitch to them? How do you get like top tier Princeton professors to say, hey, I want you to also teach at a community college? What's that pitch?
It varies. I think a lot of faculty, the best faculty, are mission driven. And whilst they love teaching students like bright, are going to be successful no matter what kind of, like young people, I think a lot of them do want to do the sort of hand-to-hand combat of like, working with students who might be the first in their family to go to college, where they can really make a huge impact on the trajectory of their lives. And then, for the rest of them, I think, it's like compensation. It's like they want, especially post-COVID, remote teaching opportunities. So, generally our faculty, they continue teaching at their home institution, Princeton, NYU, whatever it is, but then they also moonlight and teach with us. And so we pay them generally double the national wage, the national average wage for adjunct faculty, about $8,000 per class. And so they love it. They could teach, if you do the math, you could teach, we're on the quarter academic system, so 4 quarters a year instead of 2 semesters. And, the faculty, you could teach 3 classes, a quarter, 4 quarters a year. You're making $96,000 a year. It's like that's real money.
And how is your graduation rate compared to those of like the average community college?
Yeah, I mean, so far we're, it's still early days. Our first cohort will complete in April, so in just about 60 days. And it's going to be higher than the national average. It's looking like it's going to be about 40% for this very first cohort of fully online students. But the whole institution as a whole, we're doing about 60%.
Got it. And so you're having a long-term impact on these students' lives and their careers. What is the long-term goal that you want to have with campus?
Yeah. I think, look, don't get me on a soapbox, but our country has to figure out how to make it possible for everyone, no matter the conditions of your birth, whether you're born poor, middle income, or affluent, to get access to the skills and education and like credentials that you need to like go and compete and get a great career going and sort of contribute to society in a productive way, and in exchange get to live a life that's worth living and exciting. I think I hope that not only do we serve a bunch of students over time at scale, but I hope that we also create a new model for other community colleges and other institutions to replicate, where they go, hey, campus is doing things this way, and look at the results. Like, how can we adapt what we're doing to be as effective? And I think that's that'll be the holy grail.
And what are some of the things that you guys are doing to help scale that impact in the business?
Scale is, I think, the next chapter. Right now, we're still pouring concrete.
Yep.
We're still like really trying to make sure that we have our student support model right. There's a lot of nuance. A lot of software needs to be built to automate back office things, and then a lot of nuance still has to be worked through around who are the right humans. So for every that are going to serve our students. So we have the faculty. We have the TAs in the classes, but then outside of class, we also have support coaches. So for every 50 students that enroll, we have a support coach who's there to like essentially play the role my mother played for me when I was an undergrad, like, logging in, making sure I'm going to class, making sure I'm getting my assignments in. And it's like there's a lot of unanswered questions we're still thinking through and experimenting with, like around who's the right support coach? Like, is it if you're Hispanic, first gen, do you want a support coach who's like similar to you and who can point and like, hey, I know exactly what you're going through? Or does that not matter? Do you want someone who's like recent grad, like just out of college? who's a near peer, or do you want someone who's older and wiser and like whose advice you're gonna take more seriously? Like we're still like working out these nuances on the model before we're ready to scale. But I think long term, I mean, 10 million kids go to community college approximately every year, and it's one of the, depending on which years you look at, between 8 and 10 million. But it's one of the most important, I think, aspects of our higher education system. So it's really important to us.
You've had a lot of success so far. There's a long ways to go, but I think for each incremental success, there's always some sort of bad event that generally happens to help you learn. You reshared an article on LinkedIn a number of years ago that you had your share of events that seemed really bad at first, but ended up being an overall net positive. What was something that seemed really bad in the moment, but ended up being a positive?
You said I shared an article on LinkedIn?
Reshared.
I reshared.
Yeah.
I barely use
it was like
LinkedIn.
8 or 9 years ago. So.
I'm so curious what this article is. Like sort of some downsides that have come. Look, I mean, there's so much. Like choosing to start a company is like, okay, you're signing up for hardcore pain. Choosing to start a company that is working across 2 different industries, Silicon Valley and higher education, is like almost insane. Because you have to run 2 different you have to run 2 different operating systems in your brain at the same time. Like I have to be able to understand, how do I talk to, our creditors and politicians and regulators who are writing the rules of the road, and how do I make sure that we're compliant with them and we're engaging with them. But I also have to, be able to go and talk to these, VCs and investors and go hardcore. Like, yeah, look at the opportunity here. And it's just like super hard, especially whenever you're doing anything in like healthcare or education or transportation. Like you're fucking with the core operating system of this country. Like you have to take it extremely seriously. It's not just like an app like Uni Roulette where, oopsie, we're down tonight. Like no big deal. You can't meet people online. It's like, no. Every single student matters. Every single interaction with the student matters. It's like, how do you ensure excellence, operational excellence at every touch point? And so it's really tough. I have so many things that have broken and gone wrong. I mean, buying a college was extremely difficult. First, you have to find an institution whose mission aligns with what you want to do. You're not allowed to take an institution that's like a Catholic, nunnery, or seminary, and then like turn it into a community college that's going to serve the nation. You have to, and so there's like a very small number of institutions that you can even engage with, literally less, like a single digit number. And so I had to like fly around the country and like meet the owners of these institutions and interview them and have them interview me, and then try and convince the ones that I thought were mission aligned that we ought to work with them. Yeah, I think probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, I spent 18 months with the family that owned an institution. We actually signed a term sheet and to buy the institution, and I went really down that road. And there were so many red flags along the way. Like the owners were not at all excited about what we were trying to do, and I think it's like really freaking exciting. Like making high quality education accessible to everybody, and for the lowest income quartile in this country, completely free. Like that's like really cool. Zero interest from these owners. And anyway, I told our investors, we got Sam Altman to invest, we got Jason Citron to invest, we got the Bloomberg Ventures folks. Like everyone's excited. And then the day before, so we actually signed the actual agreement to acquire the college. And then the day before, literally the day before, it was like a movie, we were about to submit the deal to the regulators to approve it. The Department of Education opens an investigation into the school. And turns out they had been less than competent in administering some of the department's health, their COVID relief funding and programs. And I'm not going to speak too much about what actually they may or may not have been doing, but like it tanked the deal completely, because I'm not going to inherit a shit pile, that was improperly run, and maybe there's even malfeasance there. And so, yeah, and like mind you, there's like 3 or 4 other schools. It's not like there's like 100, And I spent 18 months on this. And I told the investors, done deal, term sheet done, agreement done, and everything. Thank God, our counsel, a guy called Charlie Rose, and his team, Mike Texan. Charlie Rose was actually the former general counsel for the Department of Education. He's like a mentor to me. He said, you have to have a clause where you can terminate in case this happens. And so thank God, thank you, Charlie. We had that clause, and so we just terminated the deal. But after 18 months of work, I did nothing but this and fundraising for like 18 months. I hadn't written a line of code. I'm an engineer. I didn't get to any engineering work. It was like, this was all consuming. And it completely collapsed, the deal, after 18 months of work. So that was, probably the hardest setback we had to overcome. I was still so bullish on this model. Everyone should be able to get a debt-free degree that's high quality and world-class education. So I was not going to quit. And I kind of just went into the zone. I didn't even take one day to like reset. And then the funniest thing happens. So it's midnight. And so we'd actually hired a banker to help us manage these conversations. And there was one school that just constantly ignored our banker.
Why was that?
They just weren't interested in talking to the banker. I don't know. I guess they don't like his look. They don't like his email. I don't know what it is. They just ignored us for 18 months, and we'd stop reaching out and I just opened up the spreadsheet that the banker put together of the like handful of schools that would work. And I just copied the email for the owner of the school. And I just wrote him a cold email at like 1 a.m., like in a sheer mode of like panic, adrenaline's running. I'm like, I know I'm not sleeping tonight. And I send him the email, and I just hey, look, you've got an amazing institution. You guys have done amazing work. I respect your, because the current owner's grandfather was the founder. I was like, I'd love to just talk to you about what I think our country needs and how we can play a role in the future of higher education. He gets back to me like within an hour, and I'm on a plane, like the next week to Sacramento to meet him, and the rest is history. We ended up, acquiring the college. It's called MTI College. And the owner, and he was only the partial owner, his 4 aunts who were all in their 70s owned the rest of the school. And so it was really tricky trying to get them to understand what we were trying to do and why they should give their father's life work to us to be good stewards of it in the future. But the owner was like super passionate about it from day one. Like, I remember having lunch with him at this restaurant. It was kind of empty. It's still like it's like right post-pandemic. Like, most people are afraid to even meet in person. And it's like just us in the restaurant. And like, he's getting excited. He starts interrupting me a little bit. Like, he's like, yeah, we could do this, we could do that. And he's like, eventually he's like, hey, I'd love to do this. I'll help you convince my aunts that we should sell, but only if I can be a part of building this with you. And like, I'm like, man, this is the opposite, the diametrical opposite of what it was like working with the other institution. And so, things work out in weird ways, and we got it approved by the regulators, and, the rest is history. But, and he's our president now. His name's Michael Zimmerman. He's a great partner. And he really believes in the vision, and he's helping us execute it forward. So sometimes the worst things that happen to you can turn out to be some of the most positive, because I'm fairly certain if we'd moved forward with that other institution, we would have found all kinds of things, all kinds of skeletons that we would have inherited, all kinds of challenges. So things work out in mysterious ways. My mother, it helps to have a praying mother.
And I guess to buy a school, I'm sure costs a ton of money. Did you finance it from the money from the investors? And if so, how did it feel to put that much of your raised capital on the line?
Extremely risky. Yeah, we financed it. Thank God for Jason Citron and Sam Altman and those guys who really, it's funny, like sometimes you think, oh, if I ask for $1 million, it might be easier than raising 20. Not when you're dealing at that level. Like, these guys are like generally only interested in doing things that are like big and like, huge swings.
Go big or go home.
Go big or go home. They're like, okay, I don't care if you're going to sell a company for $50 million or $100 million or even $1 billion. It's like, I don't get out of bed for that. Like, and so fortunately, that's never been my challenge. Like, I've always been ambitious and like trying to take the big swing, and it's just how my parents brainwashed us to be. And so yeah, I was lucky to meet those guys. I'd known Jason for years, but I met Sam around the time of the pandemic. I think in early 2020. And anyway, turned out Jason had an unusual higher education experience. He actually went to a for-profit college called Full Sail University, learned video game design for his bachelor's degree, and like really understood that there are ways in which the sort of Silicon Valley model could actually improve higher education. And then Sam actually spent some time at a community college before going to Stanford, which a lot of people don't know. And so he was just like, yeah, I've been looking for this, like, let's do it. And so anyway, yeah, we raised the money. It felt like the craziest risk to, spend a majority of the capital that we'd raised at that time. Like, I'm not going to say the exact number, but a vast majority of the capital to acquire this institution. But it was a great school. Honestly, I felt so much more comfortable buying the second school than I did than I did when we were evaluating the first. It was a really well run institution, and the people there really cared about helping students. Like, they had great outcomes, 60% graduation rate, which is unheard of in general in the 2-year and degree and certificate space, but especially for-profits. Most for-profit colleges, unfortunately, they don't perform well, and they have lower performance than the nonprofits. These guys were the opposite. So I knew that we were getting a very valuable institution that would serve as a solid foundation for us to execute our model within. And then the fact that Michael, we call him MZ, was Michael Zimmerman, was willing to stay on board and actually be president. I was like, yeah, let's do it.
And today, what's the biggest challenge you guys are facing and the thing that I guess keeps you up at night?
Oh, it's definitely graduation rates. Look, long term, the only thing that really matters to our success is, can we successfully be alchemists? Can we take in students at any, eventually any condition, put them through these processes that transform them, transform their perspective, their confidence, their knowledge, their community, their ability, and then send them out into the world, either into 4-year university, which most of them want to transfer into, or into a job, and where they go on to do good things. And that's really, really hard. These students generally don't have the luxury of making higher education and getting their degree the number one thing in their life. Like, my parents, to their credit, were always clear. Like, yeah, you have these side businesses, you have these projects, yeah, you're doing flight school, piano lessons, saxophone lessons, all the school is your focus.
Yeah, same here.
School is your focus. My dad was the type in particular who's like, you get a 91. He's like, what happened to the other 9 marbles? Like, you dropped 9 marbles. He loved to say that. You drop, like, every semester you start with 100 marbles, try not to drop any, was his thing. And so, a lot of some community college students do have, similar ability to focus on education and make it the priority, but I'd say the majority do not. And so how do you help them understand, where do you want to be in 5 years? And then to visualize that. That's honestly a third of the job, is helping them visualize where they want to be in 5 years. Most young people today have no idea, no earthly idea. And so we have to take them through an exercise of helping them visualize an optimistic, exciting possibility for where they're going to be in 5 years. And then step 2 is we have to help them understand how getting a degree is, for most of these visions, a great step that will make that vision closer to reality. And then step 3 is figuring out how to help them understand how campus is one of the best ways to pursue a degree. And then if you do that, you get them in and they enroll. And then you have to figure out how to constantly remind them, okay, your car broke down and your job's an ass, your job's sucks, and your boss is an asshole, and you're freaking out. Take a break from school is what they want to do. There's a video game, you see 2 options, like an RPG, take a break from school or keep enjoying the suck. And it's okay, take a break from school is what they always want to do. And you have to go, no. Hey, Seamus or, whatever, where do you want to be in 5 years? Now, is taking a break from school, is that going to get you closer to or farther from where you want to be in 5 years? And it's you're right, farther from. Okay, and then how do you constantly do that over and over and over and over again? You'd be shocked. We had students with 4.0 GPAs, 99% attendance rate. Something bad happens in their life. And I'm not talking about losing a loved one bad. I'm talking about still significant, but something, drama, they broke up with their boyfriend, or their, best friend, moved away, and now they want to drop out of school. And it's so how do you scale a system of people with these support coaches who build a relationship with our students and constantly re-engage them and constantly remind them of what their 5-year goal is, and keep them on track? That's what keeps me up at night. It's extremely hard to do. No one's really done it before. You know, the elite universities, I have so much respect for them. My sister's a Harvard grad. My brother's an Oxford. Man, these institutions, they're creating human knowledge that are amazing. They're educating people, but you know what they're not doing? They're not doing alchemy. They're already taking in the best people. And it's kind of like, don't screw it up. Don't screw them up. Our job is actually, let's take in, base metals and let's transform them into gold. Let's take in these people at wherever they are. Maybe they got B average in high school, wherever they are. Some of them got A average, of course, but maybe they have complexities at home, and then let's turn them into this aspirational vision of themselves. And so it's really tough.
And for students to visualize that 5-year long-term goal, how do you get students to visualize that? I'm sure that's probably pretty difficult.
So hard. We're experimenting. It's, obviously you have to have a conversation. So we do intake conversations between a support coach and a student. And, you can't just ask a student, where do you want to be in 5 years? Because almost none of them have a clue where they want to be in 5 years. And so you really have to sort of drive into what are the things they care about? Okay, you want financial independence. Okay. You want to pay your parents back for all the sacrifices they gave you, they made to give you a decent life. Maybe you've got a chip on your shoulder because your girlfriend cheated on you at the homecoming dance like mine did when I was in high school. And you want to make the world better and prove that you can, be impactful. So, we really, figure out what motivates them and then help them, what motivates them, what are they good at, what are they passionate about, and then try and, visualize something together based on those inputs.
We like to end with one closing question, which is if I slid you over a phone and you could call your 18-year-old self, would you call? And if so, what would you say?
Would I call? Yeah, I'd call. And what would I say? I'd just say spend more time with your family. Would be my number one thing. I do think, I have this unique ability. I've discovered it's relatively unique to just zone all the way in and kind of obsess and go deep. And that's kind of what the last 12 years of my life has been since I took a leave of absence from college. And I think it's great. I've learned a ton, and we wouldn't, the organization wouldn't be where it is today without that level of obsession. But I do think, sometimes there's diminishing returns being at the office till 2 a.m. and it's go hang out with your family. Don't miss these events and play a more active role there. So that's probably what I'd tell my 18-year-old self. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Tade, for taking the time to join the show. It was a great conversation. And for everyone listening, if you subscribe down below in the episode description, go check it out. And we'll have a link to Campus EDUs down there as well.